Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. We sincerely apologize for the delay due to technical difficulties. Let me welcome you to the Philippine Geographical Society Lecture Series 2021. This is the 8th lecture series that we are conducting this year. The PGS-LS is a project collaboration between the Philippine Geographical Society and the UP Department of Geography. I am Luan Ocampo, and I will be your moderator for this event. Before we proceed, let me just inform you of a few house rules. During the presentation, attendees will be on mute, but we encourage you to interact with the online community attending this session by typing your comments and questions in the chat box or through our social media account in Facebook. Questions will be addressed during the open forum. This lecture is being simultaneously streamed in the UP Department of Geography YouTube channel. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available for viewing after the event. And just to give you a heads up, we will be taking a group photo before we end the meeting, so please be ready to turn on your camera for that activity. So, to begin our session, I would like to call Professor Emmanuel Garcia, President of the Philippine Geographical Society, to give the opening remarks.
Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Welcome once again to another episode of the PGS-Lecture Series 2021. On behalf of the Philippine Geographical Society and the UP Department of Geography, I am delighted to welcome everyone in this afternoon's lecture. The PGS-Lecture Series is part of our objectives to promote the geography in lieu of an actual national conference on geographical studies, which we conduct annually. Through this, we hope to highlight the different geographic researches being done by fellow geographers and allies in the field. In this lecture, our invited speaker will discuss a timely and relevant topic about food security in the country. The lecture is entitled Prospects and Challenges for Food Security in the Philippines and is presented by the Philippine Geographical Society and the UP Department of Geography.
Eman, you accidentally muted yourself.
Sorry po. So gumawa po tayo kagaya po ng ginagawa natin before. We made a word cloud for this lecture. And the dominant words include sustainable, justice, plenty, food, access, and peace. Other interesting words in the word cloud include hunger, sovereignty, overlooked, development, and physiological. Altogether, this make a good mix of what we hope could be covered in this afternoon's talk. On this note, I again would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and as always, I hope we have a very special and productive afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Eman. And now, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker for this lecture. Our speaker is a part-time faculty at the UP Department of Geography who teaches a graduate course on food and agriculture. He is also a PhD student at the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance, or NCPAD. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Professor Juanito Berja, Jr.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Professor Ocampo, for the introduction. It's an honor to be here. My first time, and really, it feels great to be with the Kajogs, the people who are, really promoting the discipline of geography in the country. For today, let me just share my screen. For today, I'm going to talk a very important topic, but also I think similarly, a very broad one. So I'll be talking about prospects and challenges for food security in the Philippines. Food security, again, as I've said, it's quite complex. For today, we're going to focus on one aspect of that, and to help us, we will try to answer the basic question that was posed in the poster for this particular event, and that is food security viable in the era of COVID-19 pandemic, especially in our country? And to help me do that, you can see there the outline of my presentation. So the detail will follow in the different slides. Okay. Let me start with the definition of the food security. No? So for as you can see in the definition, food security is a situation. It's a condition wherein everybody, all people, no, at different scales, whether it's at the household level, up to the global level, would have experience of physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, no, that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So the definition is full of a lot of important concepts, no, but we're going to deal with that or with those important concepts in the as we go along the discussion. No? But really, when you look at the food security, it's actually um, dependent, no, on four pillars, and you will see there the four pillars, no, based on the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. When we talk about food availability, that basically refers to the physical presence of food, no, and it's actually determined by all forms of production or trade, no. So when you look around and people will ask you, is there food security in the area? You might want to look at, for example, what are the the levels or modes of production in that area, or even in your particular household. No, you might want to check on your food stock, no? And that will be able to give you an idea of one pillar of uh, food security. The next pillar is food access, and it refers to the ability of the household to acquire adequate amount of food. No? So imagine, for example, that you're in a situation, you're in a community, you're in a certain place that yes, the food is there, it's physically available, you can see it. But the next question would be, can you access it? No? So do you have the social relationship? Do you have the economic ability to access it? No? And there are certain modes, sorry, there are different modes by which people can access that. No? And that would be own production, or you can also do hunting and gathering. No? You might think, is it really in this age, no, being done? Yes, of course, in other parts of the world, that's still being done. No? And there are also certain situations when you really need to go around and look for food. No? The third mode would be to purchase it from market or from different shops. And of course, barter and gift. The gift is actually in relation to the one concept under food availability, and that is transfer. No? So gifts are actually freely handed over. No? These are transfers by which you get from your relatives, for example, or from the government if there's an emergency and they provide you with assistance. The third pillar of food security is food utilization, and it refers to the household's ability, to be able to access the food, and then the different members of the household to absorb and utilize, that food. Food utilization is sometimes referred to by literatures as the consumption part, of the food security system. And then, of course, cutting across all these three pillars would be stability. No? And stability there, if you see in this slide, is simply the consistency of all the different factors, or frames within the food security. When we say stability, then we talk about the vulnerability and risk context, of the different scales or different places where we are. So, for example, in your particular house, when I say, do you have food available there? Then you say yes, but you need to consider the temporal aspect of that, and that's where stability would come in. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So we look at the food security situation in the Philippines, and let's start with the pre-COVID or the baseline, prior to the current situation where we are. And the pre-COVID situation, we're going to use the official data from the government. So in my particular work, we normally rely on the government data as the official data, for our research and analysis. Okay, now to be able to describe the food security, let's look at the numbers. Prior to COVID-19, about a quarter of the households are considered to be food secure. So in reverse, about 70% are, 70% are food insecure. Okay. So, but when we talk about food insecurity, the situation wherein people will not be able to meet their dietary needs all the time, we talk about different categories of food insecurity. No? So in the Philippines, there are three. No? So there's mild food insecurity, there's moderate food insecurity, and there's severe food insecurity. No? Um, when we do our programming, we normally prioritize people or households that belong to the severe and then moderate. No? So in total, for example, based on the National Nutrition Survey of 2015, undertaken by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, there's about 53.8% households in the country that experience moderate or severe food insecurity. Okay, how did they measure that? They used the Household Food Insecurity Access Scale. No? So it's a module in food security analysis that provides information on the prevalence and magnitude of food insecurity at the household level. It's composed of 9 questions, no? And then, as you can see in the slide there, these questions are actually asked from the different households, and depending on their responses, they would be categorized based on the 4 food security categories that I've already mentioned. No? So basically, if we look at food security and you say that every day, all the time, no, you don't really worry about food, then you're food secure. But if there's a certain period, for example, that you worry about it, or you don't necessarily go to sleep anymore, or you sleep hungry, then that means you're experiencing food insecurity. Okay, so you can see there, no, in the slide. Again, if you rarely or you do not worry about the food, where you get it, then you are food secure. But if, for example, sometimes you worry about it, you're unable to eat your preferred food. So, for example, you're used to eating denorado, no? But you're because of your particular situation, then you just have to probably eat the regular rice, no? Then you're slowly moving towards food insecurity. Okay, so you're actually experiencing mild food insecurity there. Now, if you happen to be eating smaller portions of your meal or eating fewer meals a day, no, and that's not only happening sometimes or rarely, but oftentimes, then you're moving into moderate food insecurity. Now, if you're no longer having food, no, in the household, or again, as I've said, you're already sleeping hungry, meaning you're already going away with your food, and then for the whole day or whole night you don't no longer eat, then you're already experiencing severe food insecurity. Okay. Okay. So when we look at the food insecurity, again, the statistics that I mentioned are at the national level. No? But across the regions, you would find that Calabar zone and Central Luzon are the most food secure regions in the country. No? And then the least food insecure would be BARM. No? In BARM, for example, you would see that only 15% of the households there are food insecure, no? Based on the 2015 National Nutrition Survey. And then look at the proportion of severely food insecure. No? Almost 4 out of 10 households in the region would be severely food insecure. Okay. Now, aside from the HFIAS, no, that is being used by Food and Nutrition Research Institute, there are also other measures of food insecurity. Okay, one would be the food available per capita. No? So in a country like the Philippines, you would want to be able to measure, for example, no, what are the uh, production based on our agricultural activities. No? So we have statistics from the Department of Agriculture, but what's important is to check, no, on the amount of food that is available vis-a-vis the number of people living in our country, for example, or in certain communities. No, so that's why we have the food available per capita. So here you would see that this particular indicator would be measuring the volume of food, no, on each original unprocessed form divided by the number of people. Okay. Now, I've presented here selected crops or commodities, no, that to my mind are quite part of our typical diet. No? So as you can see here, for the latest data would be up to 2019. No? The rice would have, by the way, the unit of measurement here would be kilogram, no, per capita per annually. No? So on the average, each Filipino, based on our production, would have about 128.43 kilograms. No? So do you think you're consuming that much per year? No. And then corn, on the average, each and every one of us, based on the annual production, would have about 18.65 kilos. No? And then the rest would be there. No? So that's one way by which we can measure food security in the country. No? And that's also being considered, for example, when looking at the different parts of the country and then describing the level of food security. Another measure of food security would be the self-sufficiency ratio. Okay, so again, this particular indicator would look at the production and then consider also the population of our country. But at the same time, because each individual member of the population would have different amounts of utilization or consumption. No? So that's also factored in. No? So the self-sufficiency ratio would show the magnitude of production in relation to domestic utilization. Again, what I'm saying is, depending on your age, depending on your particular situation, each and every one of us, no, would have particular needs, no, and we will be consuming differently, or we will be utilizing food differently. That's why aside from food available per capita, we also have the self-sufficiency ratio. So the self-sufficiency ratio is measures the extent to which a country's supply of commodities is derived from each domestic production, no, considering our level of production or consumption. No, so here, interestingly, if we say that on the average, each and every one of us would have about 128.43 available food, no, annually. In terms of the self-sufficiency ratio, no, we will only have about 79.8% no, available or sufficient. We will only have available supply no, per year. No? So that means we're way below the standard no, or the projected amount of food that is available for us to sufficiently meet our needs. No? So in the second table, what you're seeing there would be numbers in percent. No? So if it's less than 100, that means we're not able to meet sufficiently the needs or the demands of each individual member of the country. No? So here you would see that only sweet potato, cassava, what else? Chicken eggs and milkfish would have sufficient amount and would sufficiently be able to meet our needs no, on the average. Whereas the rest of the commodities, we're not able to have sufficient production and so therefore will not be able to meet our needs no, across time. Okay. Next, I also provided here self-sufficiency ratio for other commodities in the country. So again, most of these are produced locally, no? And then when you look at the numbers of production vis-a-vis the utilization needs of the people, you would find that some of the aquatic produce like crabs and shrimps are able to meet no and more than meet the requirements of our diet. We will also have their fruits, papaya for example, pomelo, that are also abundant no and can necessarily meet our needs no. And then we also have, for example, the basic vegetables there like tomato, cabbage, eggplants, and ampalaya. So here what we're saying is when you look at your diet, you know, and if these are not yet included in your diet, what we're saying here, there's abundant no, supply of these commodities in our country, and we might want to include this as well in our diet, no, or consider this no in our consumption because we have abundant of this produce, no. Again, the self-sufficiency ratio here would show us what would be the amount of produce vis-a-vis the needs of the population. Okay, another measure of food security in the country is diet diversity score. No? So this one, the third measure, would provide us a better understanding of the access of the households to various food items, no? And would also give us idea of what people are consuming in terms of the quality of food. No? Now, um, FNRI was able to come up with three food groups, no, or three categories in terms of the diversity of food being consumed in the country. No? So there are certain households that are only consuming four groups or four items, namely staple or rice, vegetable, fish, beverages, condiments, and then spices. What we want to do is to expand the number of food that we are consuming. And the ideal number would be between 9 to 12 food groups. No? So what's the number that we have for the country? Well, for the Philippines, about 70% of the households are, consuming 9 to 12 groups, 9 to 12 food groups. But about 2% are actually consuming about 1 to 4 groups, and then 28% are consuming 5 to 8 food groups. No? Um, the the highest proportion of households that are consuming high diversity of food or diet would be in Cagayan Valley, no? And then the region that would have the least proportion of households consuming diverse food would be in farm, no? So here, what we're saying is the higher the number of food groups that a household is consuming, the better. No? Okay. Now, the fourth measure of food security that I'm going to share with you today would be the sources of food. No, so the government and even in our own researches would find that um, people, in the country are actually sourcing their food more from the market or the different shops, and are actually using economic transactions. No, so which is actually very interesting. No, for a country that is largely agricultural, you would find that about 90% of the food that we are consuming are actually sourced from the market. No, there are only certain groups, food groups, no, that are largely produced by each household on their own, but really a large proportion would be relying on the market. Now, what is the implication of this? It's actually not a very good news, no, because when you rely more on the market, that means again, one, the transaction is largely economic. That means if you don't have money, then you won't be able to access food. No. Second, if you rely heavily on the market, that means you will be subject to price volatility and also disruption in the food chain cycle, no, or food chain system. Okay, and that's not good, no, especially if there are shocks or unexpected events. But we're going to discuss that more later on. Okay, so when we look back at all those concepts, there are certain issues that we need to take note of, no? And here you would see five main concepts that I've highlighted. The first one is that majority of the households in the country are actually food insecure. Again, very interesting for a country that is in the tropics, no, that is largely agricultural. You would find that majority of the households are food insecure. The second one is that food production is largely centered on the staples, no? And in our case, that would be rice. Now, when you look at the different programs of the government, particularly the Department of Agriculture, a large amount of resources are invested in this particular crop alone. No, so much so that when you listen to the different scholars and then you read different literature, they would say that our programs in terms of food production, in terms of food security, or achieving food security, is so much skewed towards rice. No, we have a lot of reason for doing that. No, because we love rice for one. No, but also because culturally rice has become a political issue. No, in the country. Okay, then third would be the supply of cereals is definitely not enough. No, again, that's quite ironic because a large proportion of the resources of the government are provided or given to the production of the cereals, but still, when you look at the supply, it's not yet sufficient, no, to meet our needs. The fourth issue that we need to take note of is that households are eating less diverse diet. No? Again, the goal is for us to have more diverse diet, or for that matter, to put the idea of diversity in the whole food supply chain, no? Or food system, so that we can really easily um, realize food security. And the last issue that I would like to highlight would be, sorry for the typo error there, but food procurement is largely done through purchase, no, in the country. Okay, again, it would have a lot of implication, no, in achieving food security in the country. Why? Because again, we're dependent on the availability of jobs. We're dependent on the monetary transactions, no. And then, so when we go to the next portion of this slide, and we consider, for example, the food security in the Philippines during this time when we have the pandemic because of the COVID-19, then we would see that um, a lot of these, a lot of these issues would have big impact, no, on the viability of food security. But before that, let me say that there's not there's no national level survey that has been done or by the government at present, no, to be able to measure the food security situation in the country. What we have was the rapid nutrition assessment survey that was done by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute in November to December 2020. No? That particular survey looked at selected areas of the country to be able to make sense, no, of the food security and nutrition situation. Okay, so in all, the survey looked at 9 key areas in the country, and they've divided that into 3 categories. No? The high risk are mostly urban areas, 2 from the Metro Manila and 1 from Cebu. And then the moderate would be distributed across Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. No? And then the low risk, again, would be divided into these 3 major island groups. No? So what did they find out? So the survey, among other things, no, found that 16.7% of the household heads have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. No? And the highest would be in the high-risk areas. No? So note that the high-risk areas are those in the urban areas. No? And then 16.5% have job opportunities. No? And the highest are in the medium risk areas. No? And note that the available jobs, no, during the latter part of last year would be mostly from the service sector and also the agriculture sector. Okay, now this is interesting now. They also found that about 62.1% of the households that were included in the survey experienced moderate or severe food insecurity. Okay, now it would be wrong not to compare the baseline data from the one that was produced, no, in this particular study by FNRI. But at least when you think about it, these are already indicative, no, of the situation caused by COVID, no, or the situation on food security affected by COVID. So what we're saying is largely the different components of food system have been affected by COVID-19, and definitely they would have impact on the situation on the ground with regards to food security. Okay. Now, something to take note of, no. FNRI's study showed that food insecurity was lower in high-risk areas, primarily because food are already available there, no, and accessibility is quite high compared to the moderate and mild areas, no, primarily because the government or the different local government units are already providing assistance. If you remember the SAP, no, the Social Amelioration Program, to the three municipalities, three cities that were included in the survey, and then also because of the work of the different private institutions, providing assistance, to the different households. Okay, now here I would like to highlight that during the time of emergencies or shocks, you would see that the source of food now would be largely moving towards gifts, no, or transfers from the government or from private institutions, rather than from purchase from the market or from local production, no. And that's largely what we experienced during the COVID-19. Okay, now to go back to our question, is it now viable to realize food security at the time of the pandemic? Now, I would say that given all the measures that we have right now, given the different issues that we have in the country, and based on the particular study, conducted by FNRI, it would be very challenging. For a country where a large majority, or at least majority of the households are already experiencing food insecurity, it would be hard, to imagine us now, especially in this time of the pandemic, being able to realize, food security. Okay, but what are the positive prospects, that we can see given our current situation? For one, when we look at the different urban areas, which the FNRI study last year considered to be high risk areas, because of the high cases of COVID-19. These are also areas that are, in a way, transitioning or having some paradigm shift, with regards to food security, with regards to some aspects of food system. And that is, slowly we see in many urban areas, local government, promoting, supporting the idea of urban agriculture. In urban areas as well, you would see people slowly now experiencing, and even advocating for the production of their own food. We heard about qualitative narratives, of people that are now into gardening, people becoming plantito and plantita, and experiencing the joy of harvesting their own food. Those are some of the prospects, that are happening now at the time of the COVID, but would probably have good implication in the future. Now, so if at the moment we won't be able to easily realize food security, what should we do now? So one thing to consider is there is a need, that really that we need to bring in, to the way we do things. Okay, one is really to diversify our food system. And when I say food system, then it would include all the different elements, that can bring about food security. So these systems would start from the level of the production, or the first pillar of the food security. We should be able to diversify the way we produce our food, the way we make it available. We should be able to diversify the way we access food. So if you remember, largely households are accessing their food from the market or from the shop. We need to diversify the sources of food. We also need to diversify the way we utilize the food. Again, the good thing in this time of the pandemic is that each and every one of us are now given the time to become part of that system. So I know people, for example, that aside from being plantito and plantita, planting their own, having their own garden, but are also given the chance to prepare their own food. So we are not just consumer of food now, but also we are now becoming part of the production and also the preparation of the food. We also need to diversify, the utilization of food. And one good model that we can take note of would be the Pinggang Pinoy, which is being popularized by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, and you can find that in their website. And when you look at the Pinggang Pinoy, it's saying that from the typical group food group meal, no, that many of the households would have. Probably the 70% of the households that I presented a while ago would probably begin with the four food group items. No, four food groups. We need to increase. We need to diversify the food that we eat. No, so when you look at the Pinggang Pinoy, it would give you an idea of the different commodities, the different crops that we need to bring into our plate. No? We need to have there a balanced representation of the the glow food, as well as enough amount of water and beverages. When we look closely at the Pinggang Pinoy, it's based on our particular geography. It encompasses in a way, the idea of the Pacific Island diet. No, of course, some literature would argue that the Pacific Island diet is no longer there. No, but I would say when you look around, you would see many of the tropical fruits, many of the vegetables available to us. And don't forget, the root crops are also available. No? So we should not only look at the rice, although we love rice, but we can also diversify. We need to add there the root crops, for example, because the root crops also provides the necessary carbohydrates and even protein, to make us to provide for the nutrition that are needed by the body. So another model would be the diversity of the Korean diet. No? So if each and every one of us most likely are now, had been into are now into the K dramas. No, you would see the diversity of food that they're eating, and that's also another way, another model that we can follow in terms of diversifying our food. Okay, now to finally, to just to summarize what I've been saying. It's good that we're now talking about food security. No, but food security is very complex. It's very broad, and we need to tackle a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts. No, but the good thing is numbers are already there. No, the government through the Philippine Statistics Authority, the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, have already done the necessary researches. No, it's just up to us to look at the numbers and then probably crunch them. There are certain issues that necessarily have to be addressed. No, but the good thing is the current situation, the pandemic, is giving us that opportunity. No, again, when you look at the available, food in our environment, in our immediate geography, we have enough. Especially for example, root crops, fruit, vegetable, that can diversify the current diet that we're eating. No, so it's good to think and rethink the way we are eating the food that we have on the table. I'll stop here, and thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy to answer any question or clarification. Over to you, Professor Ocampo.
Thank you, Sir Noy, for the very insightful talk. We will now proceed with the open forum. We encourage everyone to type in your question in the Zoom chat box or in our social media accounts for those watching via YouTube. Questions or comments, anyone?
I have a comment siguro.
Joseph?
Sa talk ni Noy. Noy, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. No? Parang data. Ang daming layers of things na I myself do not know, even if yun actually masters ko dati sa economic geography. Pero ang question, hindi siya question siguro, pero para bang baka further exploration lang. Kasi sa tulad ko na nagtuturo ng Geography 1 sa UP, isa dun sa mga dinidiscuss ko sa usapin ng Actually, peripherally lang nga to, hindi masyado sa food, pero sa urban structures, yung growing trend ng urban agriculture, no? Yung parang nabanggit mo siya through gardening, and especially the extreme pleasure derived by the people of the people by the harvesting part. It's almost like seeing something grow and they can, Pero may question, siguro may isang, siguro maganda siya, pero konti pa sigurong clarifications lang para makita. Kasi parang tingin ko parang in the long run, while maganda siya, hindi siya talaga lang ang basis for food insecurity, di ba? Kasi ibig sabihin, hindi naman lahat. Ang iba kasi wala naman silang lupa or ang tinitirahan nila ay hindi naman sufficient enough to plant these kinds of things. Baka pwede mo lang mag-elaborate ng konti doon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dun Joe. If you notice, I mentioned urban agriculture, right? As one of the recent development, and it's a good prospect for food security in the country. But you're right, that's not just the only path, no, towards food security in the country. As a matter of fact, I don't think that's viable, no, in many urban areas in the country. So the idea really is not just to look at urban agriculture, but really to diversify the way we do things. No? So what I'm saying here is, for example, if you're an urban dweller, siguro one, really, if you have the space, or if you have the knowledge, even if you don't have the space, then grow your own food. Try to diversify the sources of food. No? But at the same time, if you don't have those opportunities, then try to diversify your diet. That's another way naman to promote food security. So it's not just about always buying rice, no? Kasi the rice nga is there. If you, for example, see it, it's in terms of the production, really, it's available, no, per capita. Imagine consuming 128 kilos per year. Parang unimaginable eh. Pero parang feeling ko, each and every one of us are really consuming that much. Particularly now, siguro, in this time of the pandemic. No? Pero what if, for example, instead of just cooking rice, you also put in corn there? No? So that's one way to diversify. Or, for example, again, looking at the Pacific Island diet, they actually putting in their root crops. No? So taro, for example, you add that to your rice, or you add sweet potato. No? So that's also another way, no, to diversify things. So I do agree with what you said, Joe, that urban agriculture may not really be the solution, but it's really exciting to think about a lot of local government now looking at urban agriculture. As a matter of fact, the Department of Agriculture is also encouraging people, especially in the urban areas, to plant. No? So that's the their mantra. No? So plant, even if you're in the urban areas, and they're giving away free seeds. No? As a matter of fact, in Quezon City has already identified 6 points, no, 6 areas for urban agriculture. And you know where the seedlings are coming from? It's from the Department of Agriculture. So you're right. But there are also other ways to diversify. And really, diversity or diversifying our diet would be the key towards food security in the long run. So thank you, Joe. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, Noy.
Thank you, Sir Joseph. Sir Noy, can you comment on the viability of organic farming as a solution to food security in the country?
Okay, ako, ang ganda po ng tanong. Thank you for the question. No, the production of organic what do you call that? Organic input to agriculture is just one parcel, one entity of the whole food system po. As a matter of fact, in many literature, you probably will not be able to see them, no, in terms of the food production, kasi nandun pa sila sa prior production, right? So, pero again, just like urban agriculture po, that's a welcome development, no? If people will now slowly go organic, no? Not only for food security, but also for environmental sustainability. So in my class, and in many of the talk that I'm also giving, no, I also advocate for organic agriculture. No? So again, that's one way. No, but when you think about this, we're going against the mainstream. But of course, that should not discourage us, no, from really pushing for organic agriculture. No, the mainstream right now would be artificial, no, everything artificial. But we really need to push for organic agriculture, and we need to make lang siguro by really, what do you call this, concrete cases, no, so that people will be able to see, yeah, this model is working. So yun po. I hope I was able to answer that. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you,
Ocampo.
Sir Noy. By the way, that question is from the audience, one of the members of the audience. Our next question is wonderful. Well, it's not really a question. Wonderful presentation, Sir Noy. Do you think urban agriculture being promulgated in the LGUs is sustainable and would really have an impact on food for urban households? What factors can we consider in the decision to whether or not promote it?
Okay, there are 3 questions there. So the first one, I think the short answer is no. At this time, no. Again, when you look at it, the local government po would be placed in a dilemma, no. Kasi there's really no working model at the moment, no. So ibig sabihin, if you ask a local government official, would you go for urban agriculture, use the spaces there for producing food, rather than converting that into commercial activity? So baka mapakamot siya, no. So that's really a tough question. So at this point, I guess again, as I've said, a no. But the second question, yes, it's a big yes. Urban agriculture po, or urban food production would definitely help towards achieving food security. No? So really, I guess we need to advocate for that, or we need to demand, our local government to really push for that. No? So if we are able to make a case, if we are able to generate enough interest, I guess the first question then would change. No, my answer to the first question then would change. No, if really you have a constituency that says, you know what, we don't want further development, we don't want further gray development in our area. Let's develop more of the urban areas, especially the vacant spaces there, the open spaces, into agricultural activities. Then yun po. The first 2 questions then would be yes, yes. The last question, Lou, I forgot. Can you mention that again?
What factors can we consider in the decision to whether or not promote urban farming?
Well, what are the factors? Well, I guess yung pong mga shocks like this, no, the pandemic, the different emergency situation would really make us think, no, that urban agriculture, no, if we're living in urban areas, would really be something to consider. No, the idea really there is very geographic. You really need to bring the source of food closer to where we are. No, so imagine, for example, in the pandemic, no, last year, many of the supplies outside Metro Manila, for example, coming from the provinces, they're derailed, no, or they are not able to come in here, no. So something was wrong with regards to the supply chain, with regards to the logistics at that time, no. So again, in that particular situation, I guess it makes sense, no. So, but of course, I'm not saying we should have that, no. What we're saying is, I guess we need to involve now the different academic institutions, and then see, for example, how we can do intensive agriculture. Given a small plot of land, even given, for example, the current arrangement that we have right now. Me, for example, I'm living in a condo right now, very small spaces, but how can I practice that? So I think those are some of the factors that we have to have so that we can really go for urban agriculture, and then see how viable that can contribute to food security. Over to you, Prof. Ocampo.
Thank you. Our next question is there in any way a link between urban farming and savings per household?
There are studies that says yes, there's a link. No, again, because the idea is if the source of production is near your place, where you're living, then you won't need you won't incur higher expenses in terms of transportation, no, going to the source of food, right? So definitely, your particular household or you yourself will be able to save in terms of the expenses. The other thing is, um, you can also look at the quality of the food, no. So if you know, for example, that the food is being produced by your neighbor, and you know that your neighbor is doing that organically, for example, or even, for example, using artificial inputs in agriculture, at least you know, right? At least you would be able to do the appropriate measures to address that particular concern. Okay, so in a way, when we look at food security, kasi, it's not just about food. It also has to do with your health, your medical practices, as a matter of fact. And as I've said, that's part of food utilization. No? So sa food security, kasi it's not just always producing, consuming. You also need to take note of the different practices that you have. No? So for example, your particular food consumption should be complemented with, for example, visit to your doctor, no, or for example, visit to your dentist. So may mga ganun pa, no. So but the idea is, if you're already eating nutritious food, if you're already eating, for example, quality food that are produced nearby, then probably you don't need to go to your doctor as often as before. No? So kasi the food itself will now become, in a way, contribute towards your health, no. So sabi nga nila, if you're eating good food, then you would have good health, no. So siguro yung ilan sa mga diseases, yung ilan sa mga sickness, no, mga sakit na nararamdaman before, baka mawala. So that's my take on that. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. So another question from Professor Jake Kadag. How reliable is government data on food security? Latest nutrition survey was in 2015, 6 years ago. Is it outdated? If yes, how does it affect our development goals on or related to food security?
All right. Thank you for that question. Of course, what can I say? There's no really perfect data, but the good thing is, if you want to have a national overview, definitely you need to rely on the government data. Plus, there's also no other institution in the country, that can provide, what do you call this, an alternative to the current set of data sets in the government. No? But having said that, of course, when I presented those data, I do agree that there are certain, level of analysis. There are certain level of tests that a researcher should do. No? So, so for me, in terms of the quality, I think the government data are quality data. No? But there has to be supplementary researches. There has to be local level researches that needs to be done, no? To be able to understand further what further the situation of food security in our country, or in particular parts of the country. No? Now, the good thing about the government now, no, and even in the previous administration, is that we now have the Philippine Statistics Authority, and the Philippine Statistics Authority is slowly, sharing online the different data sets that they have. And then when you look at it, many of the data sets are also being downscaled at the much lower level. No? So if you look at the PSA, there are now data there at the provincial level, and even at the municipal and city level. So it's just a matter of, again, looking for, taking time to get all of this information and then doing the necessary analysis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from BG Ibanez via YouTube. What would you say about community pantries? Is it sustainable, or what more can be done? Also, what about those that do pagpag?
That ano pa? Sorry. The last one. And also,
I'm sorry. Also, what about those that do pagpag?
okay. Sige, thank you for the question. Well, the community pantry and the pagpag are, again, I would consider them to be symptoms of the food insecurity situation in the country. No? So these are coping mechanisms, no, of the, I guess, the 70% of the households that are in the different levels of food insecurity. Okay, so siguro the numbers now, I would assume, would be much greater. No? Baka mas malaki pa sa 70% ang food insecure. But anyway, the food pantry and then the pagpag again are, coping mechanisms. They're necessary, because of the current situation that we are having right now. Are they viable? I hope so. Sana in terms of the community pantry, I hope it will evolve into really something that is institutional. My professor in NCPAG would say that the community pantry is now parang a form of people power daw in this time, because people are already giving their time, their energy, their resources, giving it and then sharing it with one another. Pero ako siguro again, so hard. It's difficult for me to say if these are viable at the moment, but again, I wish they become institutionalized. I wish each community would be able to have that venue, that platform where if you have excess, then you share it. If you have something, probably you not necessarily just give it for free, but barter it. If you have, for example, 1 kilo papaya free, and then the other community member would have 1 kilo of potato there, baka pwede mag-swap. So I hope community pantry evolve into something, something that is more institutional, more permanent. So yon. Yung pagpag naman, again, it's sad, that we have that concept in the Philippines, but what can we do? Again, dito po mapasok yung economic transaction, which is really sad. Imagine people buying, I'll call them waste, of other people, so that they will have food on their table. Pero yun nga because that's the only thing available to them, and that's the only thing that is within their purchasing power. So yun naman, I hope sana hindi matuloy. Sana matapos na yon. Sana we'll be able to give them, the opportunity to, look at certain sources of food that are there. So for example, sana may urban garden within their vicinity, or their immediate community, so that they no longer have to rely on this pagpag, but rather eat na lang what are being produced in the urban garden. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, from Carmela Taob, are there any government programs focused on addressing post-harvest losses? Also, food distribution. So much surpluses of tomatoes, for example, were discarded.
Okay. Well, I heard the Secretary Dar, in one of his interviews, saying that they are now, putting into place programs that will address food loss. Pero I'm not part, or I haven't really seen it or witnessed those programs, personally. So hard to tell at this point. But what I'm seeing, because we were experiencing that in our particular neighborhood, is that the government is now actively, promoting the Ani and Kita. It's actually a program that they bring to the urban areas, the produce of farmers, and to sell it, to the different communities and localities. So tingin ko that particular program is very good. Also to mention that again, the Department of Agriculture is pushing for plant. So they want people to plant if they have the opportunity and they have the asset to do that. I also heard that they have this program for the youth, for the young people to encourage them to go into agriculture. So they have like programs that would give capital for young people to go to the field, develop that, and then produce something for the country. So that's what I've heard.
Okay.
Thank you.
From Michelle Eusebio, what measures can we do to improve our food distribution system so no food will be wasted that would lead to loss or loss of livelihood of food producers such as vegetable farmers? I think this is related then to the question before, sir.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have 2 points there. One would be we need to promote food processing at the source of the food. No, so meaning if we have the skills, if we have the knowledge, we have to go to the different fields and then convert those excess into processed food. No, so I think one particular department that appropriate for that particular work would be the DOST. No? So we might want to invite DOST or probably private companies, that can help us really promote food processing at the local level. The second one is to is to bring in technology in the food system. So that means actually we're doing it right now. No? So there are different entities in the private groups, that are now connecting the farmers to the consumers, through cell phones, for example, through information systems, through websites. So tingin ko those are some of the viable solutions to food loss at the moment, and also to promote food security. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, comment from Professor Yanni Lopez. Another consideration is the health implication of prevailing diet, especially in rice-dependent countries, particularly in the Philippines where diabetes cases are prevalent.
Yes, thank you for that, Professor Yanni. Yes, tama po yun. There are a lot of literature na researchers that would say yung rice daw would contribute to this, for example, diabetes. Ako naman, sinasabi ko, sa akin think ko talaga dyan because we really love rice. That's cultural. We are all kanin rice members. So, pero sa akin naman is, I'm not saying we should do away with rice or probably reduce rice. What I'm saying is we need to introduce more elements, more food groups into our diet, so that hopefully the amount of rice that we're eating will, in a way, be reduced. So imagine, for example, I was able to, I had the chance to go to Solomon Islands, it's in South Pacific, and then their typical diet is the rice, but they also have boiled sabader, yung boiled banana, or sometimes you also have boiled sweet potato. So imagine if you're already eating one banana and then you're eating this much rice, siguro you will rethink, so you might probably have to reduce your rice. So tingin ko yon. That's why I'm really pushing for diversity in terms of the diet that we're consuming. And hopefully by doing that, then we can address also the itong problem of diabetes or other non-communicable diseases.
From Celsius Watchon on YouTube, what do you think are the impacts of food security in the Philippines when it comes to inclusivity and indigenous technology in the next 6 years? What should the next leader of our country be accountable for in the quest for food sovereignty? Okay. In these times of the pandemic, sorry, Sir Noy, there are several questions in this box. In these times of the pandemic, how does digitization affect the standing of the Philippines on food security? So,
sige po. Thank you. Ang ganda ng question na yun. The first one, yung pong hopefully the discourse on food security will become a political issue come 2022. I'm really looking forward po sana that we will have questions on the presidential candidates and then see what they think about food security in the country. how will they solve, how will they address the situation of, sige, sabihin na natin 17 lang muna, pero baka mas malaki pa yon eh. Sabihin mo ng 80% of the people or the households that are now experiencing food insecurity in the country. Paano nila gagawin yon? Paano nila tawag dito? Tutugunan yon. Then the second one, in terms of the food sovereignty, so magkaiba po yun, yung food security at saka yung food sovereignty. So the idea of the food security is really, again, all of us at all times, not worrying about food, because whether we're producing it on our own or we are having the capacity to buy it, we really don't have problem. Okay. Yung food sovereignty po, the idea is you're planting, you're producing your own food, and you're consuming it, and you have that luxury to do it. Now, the sad part is that in our country, food sovereignty po is really a big question mark. And again, that's very sad, because when you look at the situation of the farmers and even the fishers, sila talaga yung food insecure. So they're the ones producing food for us, but they're the ones that do not have food in their table all the time. So bakit? Kasi they have other concerns, they have other needs, and to be able to address those needs, for example, education, medicines, the basic utilities, they need to sell their produce, and sometimes when they sell that, wala nang natira sa kanila. So tingin ko we really need to push for food sovereignty, but as I always say in my class, baka medyo malayo pa po yun eh. That's the next level from food security. Let's try to realize food security muna now, but let's not lose sight of the food sovereignty. We should always go for that. We should always have the opportunity to own our own land, because when you look at the numbers, tingin ko, ngayon, kinumpute namin sa klase, ideally talaga per capita, bawat isa sa atin, meron pa talaga tayong piece of land na dapat eh. So, pero yun nga, that's something to look forward to in the future. So, food sovereignty lang muna tayo siguro sa ngayon. I'm not so sure if I answered the last question. I forgot that.
Okay. Sir, comment from Eduardo Queblatin. Thanks for the enlightening presentation. Yesterday, the FAO network launched a book about indigenous people's food system. From the geographic data available, interesting to check possible info that tells about rural IP food systems as they are linked to our forest protection and life support systems.
Sige po. Thank you very much for that one. That's also my advocacy. We should, I guess I would also encourage my colleagues here in geography to really look into the traditional food systems, the traditional diet. Yun nga yung gusto ko talaga na i-develop. Let's try to map that. We try to do that in our class. I ask our students to look at what are the traditional diets there. Because, during the pandemic last year, the Philippine Daily Inquirer came up with two, I think, news articles detailing what they call survival diet. And the survival diet, because of the pandemic, there's an emergency. And the survival diet would include many traditional foods that we have in the country. And tingin ko nga, very geographic yun because if you're already consuming traditional food, then that's in line with our particular environment, right? So really, I agree with that proposal. We really need to go to our roots, understand what's viable for our particular environment. So now the thing po is, if there's an opportunity, let's go for that. Let's do our researches, and that would definitely supplement the information that the government has. So what I'm saying is, if you have your researches, you have your data, try to share it naman din with the Philippine Statistics Authority, because they also have programs that would welcome information that are generated from the field. Okay.
Right. Comment from Michelle Eusebio. Perhaps there should be more awareness, appreciation, and preservation of diversity of endemic or native and introduced fruits, vegetables, and animal food. It is known that food is more diverse in the past than in the present. And also, Tuloy ko na, sir, kasi same person naman. Question from Michelle Eusebio din. But community pantries as sources of food, ayuda, seems to be not sustainable in the long run. Paano kapag nagkaroon ng donors fatigue ang mga nagbibigay, pero marami pa ring umaasa sa community pantries dahil wala silang pambili ng pagkain? That's our last question na rin po, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sige po. I do agree with the first part of the comment. We really need to work towards food security. We really need to go to our roots, as I've said. We need to, kumbaga, reacquaint ourselves with the traditional food systems that we have, and hopefully, we can popularize that. The thing is, right now, wala po kasing masyadong demand eh. Like for example here, I ask my students, for example, ano yung kinakain ninyo? So most likely fast food eh. Kami rin kuminsan I'll be honest, sa amin, pagpagod na kami, pag pa kami magluto, no? So andyan naman si Grab, andyan naman yung mga fast food. So we just order. No? So in urban setting, baka mahirap po talaga. No? But let's try to siguro think of ways by which we can encourage further the promotion of this participation in the whole food system. The other thing is, gusto ko yung idea that when we promote, for example, food security, let's tie that up with environmental sustainability then, with managing, protecting our environment. There are ways naman to do that. Like for example, in EU, they give farmers subsidies or allowances for any activities that would not only produce food for the society, but also would take care of the environment. No? As a matter of fact, one way is to not plant at all. No? But that's unimaginable in the Philippines, no? Because the farmer would rely on the field, for his or her own subsistence, or income. No? Pero if the government and other institutions, for example, would set aside money and would say for every tree that you would plant, or if you don't plant anything, crops, in your field, and you go to the mountain and then you just take care of the environment, I will still pay you, so that you can also, buy your own food. Then I think that's very innovative, and we will welcome that. So ano pa ba? Yun nga, tingin ko po we really need to promote all of these things. The thing is, naalala ko lang pala, the thing is, yung sa dalawang question, we really need to create that demand, no? Kasi sa atin ngayon, malakas pa po yung market system, di ba? So, yung mga farmers kasi hindi sila mag-produce ng ibang crops eh. Kung yung crop na tinatanim nila ngayon, yun yung binibili natin talaga. No? Ano yung binibili natin? Rice talaga eh, di ba? So, parang sa akin, the day won't really be happy without the rice, no? So nakakalungkot kung wala kang rice, no? So we will always buy rice, no? So si farmer, would you think na do you think iba siya ng tinatanim niya ngayon? Hindi, no? Pero kung sabihin natin, aside from the rice, aside from the palay that you're planting, you also would like to buy sweet potato, yam, taro, and all. No, we also would like to eat more vegetables. Baka mabago yung way things are being done right now. No? So sana po yun, slowly we'll have more discussions like this, and there will be more people talking about food security. No? After all, that's very basic. That's really something. No? Food, no? And you want to be secure. No? You don't want to, like for example, one day say, nga ba kukuha ng pagkain? No? You don't want that to happen. Right? You want yourself to be always, when you sleep and then when you wake up, food is there. Meron ka kakayahan. Kung minsan, although we have the money, wala naman tayong mabili. So we don't want that. Thank you very much.
Okay, and that concludes our open forum. Thank you, Sir Noy, and thank you also to our very active audience. Yeah, so to show our appreciation, the PGS would be giving a certificate to our speaker. So let me just read what's on the certificate, sir. This certificate of appreciation is given to Juanito Berja Jr. for sharing his valuable insights and expertise as virtual resource speaker for the talk Prospects and Challenges for Food Security in the Philippines as part of the Philippine Geographical Society Lecture Series 2021. held on June 26, 2021. Signed, Professor Joseph Palis, convener of the PGS Lecture Series, Professor Yani Lopez, Chair, UP Department of Geography, and Professor Emmanuel Garcia, President of Philippine Geographical Society. So thank you once again, Sir Noy, for sharing your research. And with that, we are at the end of our program. I would like to call Professor Joseph Palis, the convener of this lecture series, to give the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Luan. Thank you very much, Noy. And thanks for all the questions and provocations from the audience. They were wonderful, and I wish we have more time to discuss them all. I'm sure there will be a future forum for this. Let me just say a few things now based on some of the questions that were raised, and also Professor Berja's own data, as well as presentation and insights, which, by the way, I find really informative, refreshing, and also enriching me as a geography professor. Let me just get started that many years ago, my master's degree was on rice security in Iloilo, and so it wasn't really a shock uh, to see that in your list, for example, you listed Western Visayas as second to the bottom in terms of food insecurity, even if it is a rice growing region. Not just rice growing, but at some point it even boasted itself as a kind of central Philippine rice granary. Of course, other other regions would not probably agree with that, but that's to show you the inequality and the disparity of food availability, as well as what Professor Berha said, access. A very, very important point to consider, that not all the food in the world go to the people who need them, but it's also a matter of how access becomes such a political move here. And there were some questions here that I would like to kind of also respond to, but I believe there was a question about the post-harvest food losses, which I find really interesting, because again, there's so much food but doesn't get to be used properly before they're spoiled, right? In the United States, for example, they have this dumpster diving syndrome, where it's similar to, I think, what is pagpag here, wherein food before they get spoiled are consumed and given to the population that need it the most, which is a way of really making equitable access to these people. But I was also sobered by the idea that after working in the soup kitchen of the a food shelter in the US for about 8 years, I was also told that just because the food are available doesn't mean you should feed the people, because it might run contrary to their diet, which Noy very adequately, very eloquently pointed out in Pinggang Pinoy, no? For example, that effort from FNRI where it should have those kinds of things too, because in my experience, at least, people would come to us in the food shelter, in the homeless shelter, and ask for extra servings, seconds as they call them, and the doctor who's with us, or dietitian, would say you do not necessarily give them that just so they can be okay with it, but also there should be some kind of to make sure that they're also healthy, and eating only the right a balanced food diet, which of course it can raise a lot of questions too about food security. When someone is hungry, you feed them, right? Isn't that the parable of Jean Valjean and Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, wherein what separates food from Jean Valjean and the bread he wanted was this glass, and he had to shatter it in order to get food because he was hungry. And of course, that whole set of story revolved around him being hunted by a rather officious Inspector Javert, right? But also the community pantry, and I think Noy was very much on point here when he said that the community pantry is a syndrome, or a symptom, symptom of a much larger issue that the 70% of the people actually undergo. When you have excesses, you give it to other people. But what happens when this kind of virtual or remote type of lifestyle ends at the end? Are we still going to promote community pantry, or is this just a pandemic era kind of thing? No, so that's something we need to probably look into. I also agree about the LGU and the academic institutions being helping and providing certain kinds of distinctive competence in order to make sure that food is adequately equitable to people, but also mindful of certain kinds of realities that happen in each household, in each community, in its region, right? Um, uh, Ed Keblatin's question about the IP, the indigenous people's food system, particularly struck a chord with me because just like what Noy said, this is something we probably need to advocate for. Also, we always forget about how indigenous peoples manage to survive certain kinds of calamitous events, social, natural, environmental, and still maintain that particular kind of lifestyle, right? We're not downplaying the fact that they also had food shortage, but it's also a demonstration of their, if I may use this often used word, resiliency in order to maintain or survive this era after era of dispossession. And of course, the diversification of diet is also of particular interest, not just in the Pacific Island diet that Noy mentioned, but also, and I think this brings it to the last point that I wanted to raise. That was, I think, raised by either Carmela or Michelle, I forget. But the promotion of endemic food or fruits, for example, I asked that question before myself when I go to food sellers, when I ask, why do you produce or do you sell these apples that we never produce in this country instead of, say, Mabolo or Chesa or many of those endemic fruits? And the answer was because it's cheaper to just import them from other countries, the oranges, all kinds of things. So I feel like even more so, there should be a local support for food, for fruits, fruit wise, right? And also other forms of food that have not been given importance, considering that we are now into this particular kind of dilemma, no, social dilemma. So wonderful and rich terrain that Professor Berha brought up, and the questions too were just as amazing, if not equally so, because of the provocations that happen to our own lives, not to our own society. So I really commend Noy for doing this, and also the questions, and also for PGS and the Department of Geography for bringing this together to discuss more about the issue that plague our lives. No, and as one of you said, it's not just rice, right? It's more than that. But maybe we need a part two at this point next year for this, in order to see what we've come, what we've done, and how much more we need to do in order to help other people. So thank you very much.
Ayan. Thank you, Sir Joseph. Thank you once again for participating in the PGS Lecture Series. Just some announcements. If you are interested to become a member of the PGS, the organization has an open call for membership. For more information, please go to the PGS website, www.phgeographicalsociety.org. And the PGS Lecture Series is an ongoing event, and so we would like to request for your feedback to help us prepare and improve our future events. Kindly answer the short survey after this session. The link will be posted in the chat box for your reference. And to watch the previous sessions of the PGS Lecture Series, please go to the YouTube channel of the UP Diliman Department of Geography. The recorded lecture for this session will also be posted in the same channel. And
okay, thank you. So, and sorry for not mentioning this earlier. Thank you, Professor Ocampo. But if you're interested to listen to upcoming talks that we are going to have, we plan to have one at least, but we've done more than one in previous months. But if you are interested to listen to some of our talks similar to what Professor Berha gave, which is a way of seeing how geography applies to real world situations. We have two that's coming up. For July, we have Professor John Steffrey Elige from UPLB College of Human Ecology, who's going to talk about, let's just call it disaster studies for now, but he hasn't given me his complete title yet, but it's related to his master's thesis. And in August, we have a former instructor of our department and a bird watcher par excellence, Jonathan Villasper from the Wild Bird Club of the Philippines will talk about bird ecology and conservation. Yes. So, and of course, we have something else for August, September, all the way to December. So we would really like it if you could come to them too for these talks. Thanks.
Thank you, Sir Joseph. Before we end this online meeting, we would like to request our participants for a group photo. So please turn on your video cameras. Ready na, Sir Eman?
Okay. Wait lang.
Okay, sir?
Ay, ikaw na F.
Okay, sir. Okay, the count of 3, everyone. So please give your best smiles to the camera. Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3, smile.